Hey there, I've made some videos recently about how to set up a self-hosted instance of a service called Convex. If you haven't watched those videos, I would probably recommend going and watching some of those videos. They'll help build context for what this video is about. But basically, Convex is a backend as a service, and they provide a way to do a self-hosted instance of it if you'd like to experiment and explore it, but use your own compute to do so. They also have a cloud offering. But it's just a really great service. It's kind of in the same vein of Supabase or Firebase, but in my opinion, it's just better. And so I had a comment on one of those videos asking about how I configured my actual web server. How did I actually make my self-hosted instance of Convex publicly available, right? So that you can actually access the dashboard and that you can actually make requests to that backend, basically hook a front end up to your self-hosted instance of Convex. So that's what I'm gonna walk through in this video today. So the first thing you have to do, obviously, is you need a domain, right? If you're going to make this publicly addressable, you need some sort of domain. And so I'm just going to use the same domain I use for basically all my side projects, which is just stephenfreeborn.com. And then I just kind of subdomain everything under there. So what I did was I went to my hosting, I guess not my hosting provider, but my domain registrar where I manage my DNS settings. And I added 2 new DNS records, particularly 2 CNAME records, because I want to point these domains or these subdomains at a particular location. And so I just put an entry in there for Convex and an entry in there for dashboard.convex. So the convex.stephenfreeborn.com domain will be where my backend is running, and then the dashboard.convex subdomain is where I'll go and access the dashboard. So once those records are set up for my in my domain registrar, I can now go to my actual server and do the configuration there. In this case, I'm using Nginx, so this may not be helpful if you're using a different web server, but hopefully it kind of points you in the direction. But in this case, I am using Nginx, so that's what I'm going to be showing. So we'll go ahead and head over to my terminal here. And if you're wondering why my terminal looks a little different, it's because normally I use PowerShell, but a couple days ago I found out that warp.dev has a version of Windows now. So I installed that, and I've just kind of been using it as my daily driver just to try something different. I'm still in PowerShell, right? I'm still working in a PowerShell terminal. You can kind of see that up here by that icon up here. It's just in warp.dev. So the first thing let's do is let's SSH into my remote server. And once I'm in here, let's go ahead and navigate to my Nginx directory, which if I remember right, it's etc/Nginx. And then, of course, in here, we're going to have our 2 most important folders, which is going to be sites available and sites enabled. And if you're not familiar with Nginx, basically sites available is just a place where you put all your configurations, and then your sites enabled is where you usually will create like a symbolic link to your sites enabled, the configurations that are in your sites available folder. That way you have this ability to say, well, you can define, whatever sites you'd like to define, but they don't all have to be active and working, right? So so let's go ahead and take a look at the sites available directory. And I should have 2 in here. So I have, I kind of separate each of my configurations into the site names that they configure. So I've got one here that's for convex.stephenfreeborn.com, and then I've got another one that's for dashboard.convex.stephenfreeborn.com. So let's first take a look at the Convex one. So I'm just going to cat that out to the terminal. We'll cat that. And so here's the configurations I'm using. So obviously I'm using HTTPS. So I have some certs that I have managed by certbot. Certbot, it's a really nice, easy way that you can use Let's Encrypt to get your certification, and then certbot will help just manage and automatically update with that certification before it expires. And then you can see down here, I've got my server name identified, and then the location is basically, this is just acting as a proxy, right? So Nginx is a reverse proxy on this server. That way on this server, I can host more than one site. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take traffic that comes in that's identified for convex.stephenfreeborn.com, and I'm just going to proxy that to the service that's running on my local host on port 3210, and that's going to be my Convex backend. And 3210 is just the default port that Convex configures as part of their Docker Compose file, which we'll take a look at in a couple minutes. And then obviously I have some proxy pass directives that are part of my Nginx configurations, just to make sure that WebSockets work, that I make sure I'm passing the IP address, the host, and so that general configuration is here. And this is how I go about setting it up in Nginx so that everything is happy. And then down below here, you'll see I've also got a location that's set for /HTTP. And so the point of this directive here is to make sure that, hey, if anything comes through for convex.stephenfreeborn.com /HTTP, I want to actually direct that to a different port that's running on my local host, which is another port for the Convex backend, but that isn't handling the WebSocket connection. It's handling actual HTTP requests, because if you're not familiar with Convex primarily, the value add in it is the ability to have this reactive database, and the way they do that is using WebSockets. But they also, if you're not wanting to have that reactivity, or you're working in some front end or some particular framework that doesn't have kind of a native support for that Convex integration, right? You can just use plain old HTTP requests to access your data and update your data and query your data that's stored in Convex. So that's the reason to have this separate directive here, is basically the same thing. It's just a proxy, but it's specifically looking at the HTTP path and then taking those, rewriting that, and then passing that along to that other port that the Convex backend container is listening on. And then I just have a redirect here to basically redirect all incoming traffic to convex.stephenfreeborn.com that's coming through on HTTP to redirect it to HTTPS. So that's the first piece of configuration. This is so that you can actually have a front end hitting a publicly accessible domain and actually reaching my self-hosted instance of Convex, whether that's through a WebSocket or through a standard HTTP request. The next thing we need to configure is obviously the dashboard, so we can reach the dashboard publicly. So let's go ahead and cat that one out. So this is going to be dashboard.convex.stephenfreeborn.com, and this is very similar. So again, we just identify our server name here. I'm using HTTPS, so I've set up some certificates using Let's Encrypt, and those are being managed by Certbot. And then I've just defined, again, a proxy pass directive so that it goes from any traffic that comes in for dashboard.convex.stephenfreeborn.com. Nginx will just go ahead and proxy that to a container that's running on my local host and is listening on port 6791. And again, those ports are just the stock port that come out of the Docker Compose file from Convex. So I haven't really changed much from the Convex side. I've just basically added some CNAME records so that traffic can get routed appropriately to my server, and then I've configured now Nginx to handle those incoming requests and proxy that traffic to the proper port on my server that's actually set up to listen for these requests. Okay, so that's the Nginx configuration. That's all I had to do there. And then now let's go back to my root directory and let's cd into Convex. And then in here, all I have is my Docker Compose file. So let's go ahead and cat my Docker Compose file out. And I really didn't change much here. There's only 3, I think, environment variables I had to change here to make this work. This is the Docker Compose file that comes from Convex, just kind of how they gave it to me. And this is probably outdated now. They've probably released some newer versions that I need to, update the images. But at this point, all I had to do was I needed to swap out 3 environment variables. The first one was the Convex Cloud Origin. So this environment variable is the environment variable that basically maps to the port that is going to talk to Convex via WebSocket, right? So you remember in my Nginx configuration, I had this URL set up, or this domain set up, to proxy traffic to 3210 on my local host, which is the piece of the Convex backend that handles the WebSocket connections. And then I also had to replace the Convex site origin environment variable. And this environment variable you want to set to the URL or the domain that you configured to handle traffic that needs to be proxied to the other port that's running on the Convex backend container that handles the HTTP requests. And then the last one the last environment variable is the environment variable for the dashboard. So your dashboard obviously needs to know how to talk, where to go to talk to the actual Convex backend. So in that case, I just gave it the domain that I set up and configured to route traffic to that self-hosted instance of Convex. So that's the Docker Compose file. And now if I actually show the running Docker container, so if I say Docker PS, this might look kind of messy, but we should be able to see I've got my Convex dashboard right here, and I've got some ports exposed, right, 6791. And then I've also got my Convex backend here, and that's got 2 ports that it's exposed. And I've configured again those server names and those Nginx configurations to take the traffic from those publicly addressable domains and route them to these ports properly. And so with all that set up now, I should be able to go to convex.stephenfreeborn.com, and remember this. So this is the backend instance of Convex. So when I hit this URL, it should just let me know, hey, your Convex deployment's running. Go read the docs. So that's awesome. But then if I actually want to get to that dashboard that actually talks to this backend, then I can say dashboard.convex.stephenfreeborn.com. And I do need to give it an admin key, which let me get that admin key really quick because I don't want to expose myself. And again, this is a key. This is a key that you set up as when you're initially setting up your self-hosted instance of Convex. You'll generate a key to allow you to access this dashboard. So I'll go ahead and paste that in here. Should be able to log in. And now I've got data. I've got my tasks, and I can edit things. Basically, do all the things that you would normally do through the Convex dashboard. Let's go ahead and edit. We'll make this false. Save. I can see my functions, which in this case I just have one. Let's see, I don't have any file storage. You can see your schedules if you have any scheduled, cron jobs, and then logs, of course, and any settings that are relevant. So yeah, that's how I got Convex set up and made it publicly addressable, and so that I can actually use it with actual front ends, right, that are deployed out in the real world. So if anybody has any thoughts or ideas for a side project to actually use this self-hosted instance of Convex for, I'd love to hear it. I haven't come up with any fun projects, but if you have any, leave a comment. But otherwise, I hope that helped. If you're using Nginx too, and you're wanting to get your self-hosted instance of Convex available so you can use it, I hope this helps you. Leave any comments, leave any questions you have. I'd be happy to try to answer them more. Otherwise, I'll just direct you over to the wonderful Convex documentation. They do such a wonderful job with all their docs. So if I can't help you, I know they will be able to. All right. I will talk to you guys in another live or another short or another video. I'll see you then. Hope you guys are having a good day. And hope you have a great rest of the time until I see you again. See y'all.